In this video, I want to speak to people who are working to take over their family firm, so family accounting firm, or maybe you're just working with family and you're having some trouble, and I've been there, and I want to just speak a little bit to my experience and what I think has helped me a lot. So I'm Jasmine DiLucci, I'm a tax attorney, CPA, and enrolled agent. I've been doing this for a while, so I got my enrolled agent license back in high school. Why? Surprise, because both my parents were in tax and because I had a family firm, right? They had a CPA firm. And so the last thing I ever imagined was getting involved in that CPA firm. Honestly, it was very small. It wasn't glamorous, okay? They worked a lot. They didn't make that much. They were always stressed out. Every deadline was just insane. Clients would call and honestly, they weren't that nice. And a lot of times they weren't nice and they weren't paying us, which to me was a very crazy, ironic thing to see. But that's part of building. You want to build a better firm. So my parents didn't do that initially. And I honestly just got thrown into it because my mom got sick. It wasn't like I planned to take over. I was planning to go become a tax attorney, which I of course still did, but I actually was running the CPA firm before and then during law school because my mom got sick. I had to take over. And who am I running it with? Well, my dad. And I love my dad and he's great, but of course, like any relationship, there's always that control dynamic. And I think actually I'm similar to my dad because I think we both like to have control. And that definitely showed up early in the relationship with running the firm when I joined because I was inexperienced. He had started it. I thought I had better ideas than him. He really didn't have confidence in that yet. So that's where we were at. And I think I've seen a lot of people in the same situation. So I've actually I just went to a conference last week, spoke at that conference and met someone who, same thing. It's a father-daughter relationship. But she's in her 40s and it's kind of this, it's like that dynamic doesn't go away. Like your dad's still older than you. So he still thinks and he still knows actually that he does have more experience than you. But that doesn't mean he's making better decisions. So as far as how to handle it, we're all still human, right? And people love familiarity. So your parent, whoever you're working with, they like the familiar if they're used to it. The way I approached it and that I think works best is you don't want to logic out of it. You don't want, it's not over explaining it or debating it or yelling about it or talking about it for days and days and days because I tried some of that. And, that's not the reason they're hanging on to certain things, right? At the end of the day, they're hanging on to a lot of things just from familiarity and emotion. It's not from a logical place, so you're not going to get out of it with logic. So to me, it really came down to showing that I made great decisions, right? So I always recommend, the way I tried to do it was I found things that maybe weren't as important to him. So I found things like the billing, right? He wasn't as attached to the billing, and also it's very closely tied to the profits of the firm, versus he was much more attached to the employee he was working with, even though I thought that employee shouldn't be there. That wasn't the first thing I went for. So I started showing that I made good decisions, showing that I cared, showing that I was good at improving the firm in other areas. And then it's once they start seeing that track record and seeing it improve their own life, that they're more likely to keep going. And the reality is, especially if you have a small firm, right? If your parent's running a multi-million dollar firm, I'd say, okay, well, maybe you shouldn't be opposing them so much. But if it's a small firm, which my parents was, right? It was a couple $100,000 in gross receipts. The reality is there's so many things wrong with the firm, just given the size. There are so many areas for improvement that you can just focus on the ones that maybe are less personal to your family member, show that history of making killer decisions, and then that's when then you start getting closer to things that might make them a little bit more uncomfortable to let go of, but they've seen that history of you just crushing it and caring and improving the firm, and most people start letting up at that point, right? They start saying, wait a second, I'm happier. Wait a second, there's more money in the bank account, right? That's my dad. My dad was saying, okay, wait a second, we've got some more profit here. And we've got employees that are really contributing a lot more here. And oh wow, client was way more appreciative than I've ever seen. All of the above, right? So they start seeing that, and we're humans, and as much as they may say they'll never change their decision, they often do when they see that you make their life better. So that's honestly, that's straight up my advice. And then the one other thing I think I'd mention, and this is just how I approach business in general, not even just with family, but you just got to go for it. right? I think a lot of accountants, I've worked with a good number of accountants now and spoken to a ton, and there's this theme of like, we're very risk averse, which is okay, but it's like you have to recognize that is kind of a weakness a lot of times in business, right? Being overly risk averse, being indecisive, not making decisions. A lot of times for business, it is the making of the decisions that you learn from. So you're like literally not learning. If you just sit there stagnant, being nervous to do something, nervous to oppose your parent, I'm very much a forgiveness, not permission, right? So if you're gonna do stuff, I would choose the things that are less personal to your parent. I would straight up go for it. You know, maybe you give them a heads up if you want, but for me, I was just like, I went full force, and it worked really well. So that's how I would recommend it, especially if you find yourself maybe getting a little resentment for your parents saying, well, I could do this better, but they just won't let me. Like, my response would be, show them it works. Like, show them, you know, and maybe you have to do it outside their firm. Maybe you have to show them, you know what, I'm going to do this on the side a little bit. I'm going to show them it's awesome. And then maybe they'll let me do it. But it's definitely the action over inaction that I highly recommend. So with that, I hope this was helpful. If you are an accountant and you are struggling, maybe growing your family firm, I've been there. I have much more to say about it than what is just in this video, because of course my dad watches these as well. So I always have to, you know, maybe be a little careful. But if you want to work with me on it or just learn from me like more about it, please book a call at the link in the description.